Hi, and welcome to the Design Find podcast. Here we'll be interviewing women in the design field and finding out about their journey and their opportunities now in the design field. Today we have Ananta, and she's going to be telling us about her story and what she does in the design field. So, welcome.
Hi.
Is this your first podcast?
It sort of is my first podcast, yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Exciting, of course. So, first, I want you to tell the listeners what's your story, what's kind of like the life story of you we can get in like a minute.
Wow, okay. So I think in a nutshell, I'd like to call myself an artist. I'm someone that has instinctively been drawing and making things look more beautiful since I was a kid. I've traveled a lot and I've been very adventurous and experimental with the projects I take and the stuff I do. So that took me all around the world to do 2 different continents, to live and to work. And it also got me an opportunity to meet some amazing creative company founders and people that actually create a lot of beautiful things, especially when it comes to sustainability.
So can you tell the listeners what you do and what inspired you to do what you do?
So I have a double master's degree. One is in media governance and the other is in international relations. And I chose very academic degrees to know what's happening around the world. But I think at the background, I was always an artist and I was always attracted to design, and not just design for the aesthetics of it, but also design for the science and for its psychological properties. So I think the inspiration comes from my mother. She is the artistic person in the family. And I think she was inspired by her mother. So I come from a line of like very successful artists, creative people.
So you were
My
always
grandmother,
around that energy when you were growing
I
up.
was always around it, always.
Mhm.
I had very strong women showing me what it is to appreciate the beauty in the world around us, even if it's just very simple thing like a flower blossoming, or the way a bee is rotating and flying around a flower,
Mhm.
or the way leaves are blooming. They had a very unique way of looking at the world, both my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother used to use words to represent it, and my mother used to use art, drawing, and just basically attention. So this is what inspired me. And I think after studying in a higher degree for about 6, 7 years, so 7 years of higher education, 2 years of employment in the sustainability world, and I just decided, like, after the pandemic that, I want to spend, life is so short, so I want to spend it doing things that I really enjoy, and design is definitely one of them.
So you think that like after the pandemic, it really opened your worldview up and what you think about what you really want to do in life?
It did. It showed us how fragile the world is. And I mean, growing up, I always knew that this extremely hyper-connected world is not the healthiest way to live and to perform your tasks. But like they say, you're a part of the rat race. And every one of us was a part of the rat race. And we were all kind of competing with each other and competing with our own timelines, which were imaginary and imposed. And with the pandemic, it was so nice to have that stop, where you're forced to do nothing but sit at home and just sit with yourself and the things that you like to do with no interaction from the outside world. And I think that was one of the most like pivotal moments for me in the last few years that made me make this drastic shift from going from NGOs to design and art.
So what was like your quarantine story? Where were you? What did you do? What were you working on?
So my quarantine story is really, it's a bit of like a tragedy. This was my second degree and my second graduation that I didn't get to attend. It was also the start of my career in Europe, so I should have technically found a job and found, like the next steps to taking my career forward. But that didn't happen because I got an internship and I was really lucky. The first half of the pandemic was, I had a work from home position. I was working with an NGO, which was a youth organization, and we were working with democracy and tolerance and, like entrepreneurship, these topics, and that was pretty cool. But what was sad about it was as soon as the second pandemic started, my internship ended, and that was me like stuck with myself and a bunch of CVs wondering what to do next.
Right. So what do you think like is your biggest inspiration about being a designer, and what's something you're super drawn to, and what's your really big like passion in the field?
I think the biggest factor that draws me to it is the intuitiveness that comes along with design field. As somebody who's neurodiverse, I mean, I am dyslexic and ADD, so anything that allows me to go with the flow, go without restrictions, go without the boxes and the lines and the boundaries, it really helps me and my soul. And what I realize is that, you know, the fact that I can do lateral thinking and the fact that I can always think a bit beyond what we're supposed to be doing in terms of like restrictions, um, it really helps to have that kind of, like I said, instinctiveness. The fact that I can go with the flow and I can change whatever I'm working on depending on how it develops and evolves. So you never really know what you're starting off with. You always end up developing something once you start the project. So the exclusive like factor where, you know, your whole project is an adventure. You don't know what's going to happen next. And I think that keeps up the energy levels, and it keeps up the passion, and you know, kind of keeps you more motivated to keep going. And as opposed to like something which is quite black and white, like going to the office every day and knowing exactly what you're going to do and doing something very repetitive.
So what we say is your like style in terms of design, like aesthetically.
um I'm very abstract. I use a lot of lines and circles, and I use a lot of um balance equations. So I think in every project that I have, it's really difficult to liken whatever I draw or make with an actual real life thing, but it's always like an abstract form of whatever theme I'm trying to represent. Even in my branding projects, when we design logos and we just try to design like brand strategies, it's always very representative and abstract. So it gives the person who's looking at your piece the opportunity to look into themselves a little bit and explore within their own minds what is it that they're seeing. And also it's like an instigator to help you, you know, think and listen and probe and question what it is that you're looking at.
This is more like personally to you. What are like the best tools you use being a designer? Do you just use an iPad? Do you draw everything on paper? Do you like materials? What's like your go-to medium of how to plan things out?
So I just bought, it took me literally, I mean, just last month I got an iPad Pro, and
Amazing.
I'm just learning how to use the stylus and the screen, and it's an amazing piece of equipment, but it's very complicated and it's very confusing because Illustrator is not like, it's not how you draw. Drawing something on a pen and paper or even arranging things, it has a very different sort of feel to it than, you know, like dots that you kind of touch in different parts of the screen to have a fixed form. So pen and paper is me, definitely. And also the rougher the surface, the better. I feel that I work really well with friction and against friction. And also when I was a body artist and especially a henna artist, I saw that speed really helps me. So
You
any
were a
medium
henna
that I like,
artist?
yeah.
Oh, explain that. I love henna and I know everyone loves henna. Explain that story. That's
They
super
do.
cool. And
So
so and like
so
the details, because if you mess up, then it like stays. Like
okay.
a tattoo.
So henna is the big secret of our lives. That's the business that my mother created in Edinburgh 25 years ago. She loved the medium. She loved henna, and nobody knew what henna was in the beginning.
Mhm.
So she would sit down in the middle of a busy festival with a henna cone, drawing on people's bodies and trying to explain to them that, you know, this is going to stay for 2 weeks. And, you know, this is like, it's a traditional form from India, and we draw patterns and we have a very different style of like drawing designs. So that's her doing this for 25 years. I started doing this with her 10 years ago. And this was one of our main gigs and continues to be one of our main gigs in Edinburgh. And it's basically she and I, we sit in the middle of the festival. We have close to 3,000, 4,000 customers in a month. And we draw more than 100 designs a day. It's super intensive, but for me, it's so amazing because yes, once you make a mistake, you can't rub it. So that makes it more challenging. When I spoke about passion, I was like, it needs to be really fast. It has to be really high pressure, and you really feel the gratification when you do a design really well. With me, it was more like my USP was the fact that I was really fast. My brain works really well if I'm really fast, and if the cone's made really well, you can draw really quickly. So with pen and paper, sometimes I found that it was actually difficult. The friction wasn't allowing me to go as fast, but henna allowed me to be. So I would take sometimes close to like 2 minutes to draw a full design. Less than 2 minutes. Yeah, sometimes I would take about 30 to 45 seconds to draw like a simple design on someone's hand, and it was so gratifying because the person's like sitting in front of you. You have, and it's a very intimate process. You have a person's hand in your hand. There's very little distance, between the two of you, and for that moment, it's just you and this other person, and you're drawing on them, and they're like basically they're completely yours. And once the henna is done, they go away to another part of the world, and they have you with them for 2 weeks. So when I used to draw, and I used to draw super fast, people would be spellbound, and it's so gratifying to like have somebody completely whipped out by what you've made for them. They're like, how did you, it just kind of came out magically out of your hand. You've just sat here and designed something. And these would all be like permutation combinations of designs I've done before. So like I said, a lot of my motifs are abstract. There's trees, birds. I've studied like so many different parts of like different designs from different countries, seeing how different cultures represent very simple everyday things, and then used them to make henna designs or even designs for my own artwork. And I just play around with it. You have a fixed few sets, and you just have different permutation combinations of all of these things, and you make them, and you break them, and what you have is like something completely new and different, a completely original artwork.
That's amazing. Body art is like another type of art because it's on someone. Like they don't get to choose, oh, I like that, I like that. It's on you, especially like if it's a tattoo that's completely permanent. Like I can imagine the pressure for that. But even henna, and like it must be really satisfying though when someone like loves it and is super happy, because that's why you do it.
It is. I think that was what made me decide that, okay, I want to be an artist now. I don't care about changing the world. I don't care about policy anymore. I just want to find that happiness I get at that moment. And for me, like one of the most heartwarming experiences was when I sat down doing henna for the first time after the pandemic. So for 2 years, I hadn't drawn, and henna would be the only artistic thing that I would do despite all the studying and all the training and whatever work that I was doing. So when I sat down and I had my first client, and I had their hand in my hand, and I drew whatever design they wanted me to draw for them, and then when they said thank you, and when we had an interaction, I was like, my heart felt alive. I was like, now I know what's been missing in my life for so long.
You missed it.
I really missed it. And I'm really, really grateful that now I don't have a single bit of doubt inside me. And it doesn't matter what people think about, having a henna stall and being like, studying so much and still doing something simple. Criticisms actually don't really matter. But like, I know now that, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I want to dedicate a portion of my life to it.
That's great, because I think so many people go to college and they pick their major, especially if they're in the UK when they're 18, and then they expect to do that for the next 50 years of their life. And it's kind of hard to predict what you want to be when you're 18 and you don't know, and a lot of things in the world change, especially this year. So I think it's really cool that you like got yourself in. It might have not been the most safe situation, because if you were going, oh, you got your master's degree, you want to get a job, that was like the road you were going on. But it's really cool that you're able to like promote yourself, and you're gonna back yourself up and say, I'm gonna change and do what I'm passionate about. So I really respect that.
Thank you.
So what do you think is the most underrated part about being a designer?
Okay, because you do something so effortlessly, people think it's so easy to do. And when I used to watch people making these complicated designs on Illustrator, I used to be like, oh, this is so easy, I can also do it, until I got my iPad. and I got Illustrator on my iPad, and I started to use the pen tool, and I was like, what is this?
Another type of
My
art, Apple art.
yeah, it's so complicated. These tools are difficult to learn. They need a different kind of hand eye coordination, so many hours of practice. So as a designer, I think the most underrated thing is your art. People think it's so easy to make this stuff, but it's not. And so every artist, every designer is basically a unique person because they have spent thousands of hours trying to develop, trying to perfect the skill, and come up with whatever it is that they're trying to portray or display or even sell. I think every bit of art, no matter how simple it is, deserves a lot of appreciation.
So can you tell us about, now you mentioned to me that you're doing something in Poland and you're doing sustainable labels. Can you talk about that now? Because I know sustainable fashion is really huge in the news, and everyone hopefully is trying to get their take and become more sustainable, especially in terms of fast fashion. So can you tell us like what you do and how do you think it's helping, and some other tips to give people a more sustainable life?
Okay, so right now I'm trying to develop a system or a template that can guide companies to becoming more sustainable. A part of my focus is on fashion companies, primarily because this is the industry that I've been most familiar with for like a long period of time. So I worked with a solid waste management NGO for 3 months when I was in India last year. And that got me really hyper aware on the challenges of wastes that we have in the world right now, be it landfills or recycling. And the second thing is the amount of damage that we do to the earth because of fashion. So denim like wastes so much of water. The dyeing process kills your landscape. Producing certain fibers can create so much pollution. And also, I really don't understand why people need to buy, like a new piece of garments every week. I mean, I buy 3 pairs of clothing in 1 year, and that's all I buy. I will not buy anything more.
So you're very
than,
strict with yourself?
Extremely. I've always been very strict with how much I consume and also where I buy it from. I don't remember the last time I bought something from a fast fashion label. I think I've never bought something from Zara, never bought something from H&M. Maybe a few times I've bought something in emergency from Primark. But most of the clothes I buy are recycled. They're secondhand from secondhand or vintage shops. And my entire fashion is designed around upcycling clothes. So I mean that's more personal take on things. But I was doing R&D for a sustainable fashion company in the States. I was helping them design, or not design, but like do some research on bio leather that's 100% biodegradable. And even within that, I realized that it's not easy as just growing a little bit of leather on top of a sheet and making bags out of it. There's a whole process, a very complicated process that comes from making that biomaterial ready and available for people. So there's a lot of buzz, and I think a lot of the buzz is because fashion attracts so much money, and it's a part of the media really supports, or not supports, but really shows a lot about what's happening in the fashion world. So it's only instinctive that with the UN SDG 30 goals and everything, that all the hue and cry that we have right now in the world about being sustainable, that fashion goes under the radar and is demanded to like change its ways a little bit. So yeah, so most of my work around this is helping companies understand how their production processes are impacting the earth, and also if they can make any better sustainable and cost-effective alternatives.
That's amazing. So you're trying to help them, and are there any companies that you're admiring now for sustainable reasons, or any companies that you think that are getting there, to like kind of shout them out so people can support those companies more?
At the moment, I do not know of any. It's also because I'm actually quite strict when it comes to making a decision about this. I am helping one fashion label called Namaste, but it hasn't started production yet. And I know that some larger companies are taking like effective measures to become more sustainable. But I would say if people were to buy something and they want it to be sustainable, check where it's coming from, check who's making it, check the fabric. If it's cotton, bio cotton, hemp is amazing for you, bamboo is great. Look at the cloth, the material that you're buying, and make sure that it's like something more organic. Anything that has even a little bit of processing usually involves a very high on energy manufacturing process, and that's basically not sustainable. So anything organic, anything with cotton, anything, even silk is actually not that bad. There's a lot of negative attention given to silk, but even silk has for generations been a part of our fashion or clothing system. So yeah, watch what you're wearing, read the labels properly, and I'm sure there are lots of companies outside, but I like the listeners to like go and find this out on their own. And maybe in a few months I'll be in a position to say, okay, this company is doing it well, or support us.
I think there's also a lot of backlash with companies just claiming that they're like super sustainable and good for the environment. Like I was reading something about, I don't know if you've heard of the brand Reformation. It's super big in the United States, and they claim, oh, vegan, blah blah blah, like it's super sustainable, and they have these very cool like trendy stores that make it looks like everything's like one of a kind. But you read the label, it's like all made in like Vietnam in factories, and they're all made of like materials that are not sustainable at all. So I think people are very quick to believe. It's obviously easier to believe than to actually research. And I think also it's kind of funny how like in brands such as like H&M, there's boxes being like, we're sustainable now. If you drop your clothes off now, you get 5% off your next purchase. And they're trying to be like, we're doing our part, when they like make so much waste towards the world, and it's so cheap, and they have so much terrible labor circumstances, and it's just everything about the company is like horrible, but they're trying to be like, oh, you can donate your clothes here, so it's fine. So I think it's really funny, but it's like obviously companies are realizing that sustainability is the future and they do need to switch their ways. So I think that's a positive that people can learn from, though.
What I've noticed from the research that I've done recently, and I was also a part of a challenge where we were trying to design like a circular economy model for Swarovski jewelry.
Yes.
And it was not just them, but we were looking at some other, home appliances companies, we're looking for bioplastic solutions for packaging companies. And from the discussions that we were having in the brainstorming, we came to a simple conclusion that if you're a large company, you're not sustainable. You can become more sustainable. You can choose to, go for option B instead of A, and probably save the planet 5% more. But if you're a large company, you're not sustainable. If you want to make profits, you're not sustainable. Because profit happens when you make or you manufacture something really cheap and then you sell it all across the world with branding and all these different processes to make it more expensive. So if you want to be sustainable, shop local. Shop from local designers, local shops, people that are making within your, and I know these things are a bit more expensive, but they could last a lot longer. They could end up, like not making that much of an impact to landfills and just be better for the economy. So, and I'm really, really glad that we do have strict measures, like to check on labels, where is this made, what's the fabric constituency, because companies do like to, like show a very glossy picture and not actually live up to those promises. So even if you can't do a lot of research in, what you're buying and where is it coming from, the harder it is to get something, the better it is for the planet. Or if it's actually made locally, then it's good. And I think it's just the level of awareness and the consciousness level that we need to raise amongst us as people to think about, how is it possible that I can't stitch a t-shirt, yet I can find it for $10? Mm-hmm. How is it possible? To ask these really,
like there's some gap in the market. There's someone that's not getting that money, or some material that's being very cheap. So what are some things that people can look for in the labels and you can know like, this is definitely bad for the environment?
So a little bit of understanding of materials would be a good way to start. Anything that has cotton, wool, silk, hemp, bamboo, organic fibers that sound organic, they're all going to be good for, like for you, your skin, and also for the planet. Cotton did have it did go under a lot of rage because people were using very unsustainable methods to grow cotton.
Don't
But
you
then
need a
when
lot of water or something for cotton?
you need a lot of water, and it also destroys the soil
Mhm.
that it's growing on. So you can't grow anything else for a while after you've had like a field of or a crop of cotton. So check the label, see what's the material. If you find nylon or polyamide, or there's so many different kinds of synthetic fibers, if you find that, then it probably means that it's made from petroleum. My mother had a really interesting test, and she would make me try it every time we went out to buy clothes or to buy saris, like in India.
Mhm.
She'd be like, okay, so is this real, is this natural fiber? And the person be like, yeah, this is natural fiber. And then she'll take a small thread out from the cloth, she'll burn it, and then she'll see how it's burning. And if it burns and it's a very ashy residue, then that's organic, because it's something that's come from the earth. If it burns and it forms a lump, so it becomes a very weird, sticky, lumpy material,
Mhm.
then it's synthetic, it's nylon. So I mean, though I wouldn't
If
say
people
like
were
go
lying.
around burning. Yeah, so he would be lying. He'd be lying, and so mom would know and she'd catch him. So yeah, this is like, I think, for hundreds of years, the telltale test for organic fabrics
Um,
and synthetic.
what is your biggest achievement?
What is my biggest achievement? Wow, I don't think I've done enough to like
There
call
must
them
be one
massive
thing.
achievements. um I think my biggest achievement would be to challenge the cultural norms that I grew up with as a child. So I come from India, and India is quite a restrictive country. And I think my biggest achievement is to be able to understand who I am as a person and fight for who I am as a person and my views. Being sustainable is not easy.
Are you
Telling your family that
100% sustainable or like
I am close to, yeah. I mean, I still buy vegetables that come in plastic,
Mhm.
but I am more sustainable than quite a lot of people that I know.
What type of
And I
measures
also,
do you take? Like what type of things that the average person doesn't do?
so I don't buy a lot of clothes. I don't consume a lot. I
Mhm.
don't buy a lot of stuff from the market. I try not to buy anything that's made from plastic unless it's absolutely necessary. Most of my clothes are organic fibers. When it comes to food, I eat food that's locally produced. I Even the meat that I eat is, locally, like, grown. It's free range
Mhm.
meat. And what else? I mean, when I was sharing an apartment with two German girls, the rubbish heap that they had after a week was about the same size as the rubbish heap I had after a whole month.
Wow.
They would throw out like a bag of rubbish every 3 or 4 days, and my plastic bag would, every month or so, I would collect everything, and then once a month go and
It's
throw
a
out
great way to
all the
track
plastic.
yourself. That's super great.
It is,
I
yeah.
don't know if you have it in Poland, but I've seen a lot in Hong Kong. There's these like wholesale markets where they have all these ingredients and you just bring your own containers and you fill it up and they weigh it. And I think like for grocery stores, for everything, because there's so much excess plastic, especially for buying food. So there's these great bins and you just put it into your own plastic containers, like reusable ones, and you just like weigh it and then you bring it home. And I think that's a really cool idea that more people should start doing, because when you look at a grocery store, it's just killing the world.
Yeah. Mostly large scale chain supermarkets, they use way too much plastic. And I mean, in India, we used to go to the vegetable market every evening or every other evening, and then come back with like a big jhola, like a cotton cloth bag full of vegetables. And all the food that would be in paper bags, And in the last 10 years, it's just changed. Everything's in plastic.
Everything's
Um,
expensive.
So in Poland, no, we've just got some concept stores where you can go and, like get your own containers and fill them up. But it's a trend which is not very popular still. I think we need to make policy changes at the top level, and big supermarket chains need to be pressured by larger organizations to actually forcibly change the way they package their products.
I have more of like a niche question to the era we're in. How I know COVID, people used a lot of plastic. Obviously, the only way to be sanitary sometimes is to have a lot of plastic. What are some ways, or did you find any like cool masks or things that are, because I think one of the biggest things that we're gonna find in the ocean 10 years from now, masks. Every single person in the world is wearing them one every day, like a new one
It's
every day. Like that's
insane. I
crazy.
know. It's insane. I try not to think about it because if you do, you'd end up with a panic attack.
Yeah,
There's
the amount
so much.
every single day is insane. But like that's the way that people were kept safe, and so did you find any ways that you could still be like safe without using plastic and those type of materials?
Well, I didn't go out much. I did my bit by not really engaging and going out that much. I made my own house like a perfect haven. But also my mother, she made some handmade masks for me.
Hmm.
And I have like 5 or 6 different masks that different people have given me and they've made it, and I just use those. And then I would tell people also to do the same. But it's like you can't infringe on someone and say that, look, you're supposed to be wearing, cloth masks and not these plastic ones. And also the disposable masks are like, they're so easy to get. They're cheap.
They're
People
so
buy
easy.
them.
And
They
I
have
think there are
packs of
some
10.
laws that some places they say they're safer because they like
Yeah.
protect more. So like you can't argue with that if someone's
Yeah.
not comfortable.
Yeah. It's a sad part of our mind. Yeah, I was going to say, with all the technological advancements that are happening right now, and all the money that's been funded into sustainability, sustainable technologies and stuff and so forth, I hope that people figure out a way how to, like somehow transform the plastic that we've consumed, especially because of the pandemic, and like transform it into something else. And while I was working for the solid waste management organization, I did notice that there is a way to, a very effective way of reusing the plastic. It's
Oh,
just that it takes a lot of money, and different plastics have a different recycling process. So this is all like money intensive.
yeah. But I think it's like an investment of our future, and
It is.
on the world in a whole, like especially with these large corporations, they're not at like they're not in debt, like they have enough money and like resources to do it, like Amazon for example, they use so much plastic and have so much damage to the earth, but like they're a super super successful company, they can do have the measures to take it, so it's kind of about greed, and that's what it comes down to, and what they're choosing to spend their money on.
It is. It is definitely. I mean, a few decades ago, when they discovered plastic, how to make plastic, and they, figured out the whole way of drilling holes and bringing out the petroleum and whatever, whatnot. I mean, we made the mistake of setting up those companies. Trillions of dollars have been invested in those
Where
companies. So
everyone's
much
still
money has been
invested in
invested.
those companies,
They're still investing in it.
they're
So
reliant
so
on.
much money's gone in. If they stop producing plastic, it'll probably topple America and some other large countries' economies. It probably will. And oil also it takes so much. Um,
Mhm.
all around the world, there's so much money invested in oil. We haven't found a way out yet.
So what are your hopes and dreams for the future, and something you might want to change about this like sustainable issue in the world, especially in the divine design field?
Um, Given everything that I've learned since I was a child, and the tools that were made available for me to understand that this is my relationship with the earth, I'm pretty positive that um, I will, in the next couple of, like, maybe a decade or so, be able to inspire people to become more sustainable and make progressive changes and not just minimal changes. I'm also very hopeful. I used to be very negative and skeptical about the future of the earth, but
I think it's hard sometimes not to.
I'm now that I'm seeing how much people are actually working in this field, I'm pretty hopeful that we will have.
Okay, so to end on, what is like your biggest advice to people wanting to get into the design field, particularly sustainable um, areas in the design field?
Um, so I would always recommend people to be very um, open with making mistakes. The more you experiment, the more you make mistakes, the better your chances are of developing something which is quite unique. And also not to hesitate in finding, new and innovative ways to solve a problem. Because a lot of the times, the best ways to solve something is usually by accident. People accidentally discover solutions for very big and important problems. So I would say not to be scared, not to have any fear of failure, and to just go with it and to experiment as much as you can in the field of design and in the field of sustainable solutions. And also to not lose hope. I mean, there's huge future in bioplastics. Our earth has an amazing regenerative quality. It's so immense that there's nothing that can parallel the regenerative properties that the earth has. So if you believe in it, then you will also come up with solutions that will help the earth become more healthier and a better place to live in.
Great, thank you so much. It was so great to
You're
have you
welcome.
on.
Thank you.
So people can find you. What's your Instagram or your email, or a place that people can watch you and all the great things you do or contact you?
I have an email address that I can share. I can also give you my Instagram,
Yes.
which I used to be very active on, but I've actually stopped paying that much attention to social media. But you can find me on Instagram and also on LinkedIn. So I'll send the
What is
links.
your Instagram?
My Instagram is at I am Vangmai. My company, or the spelling of Vangmai is Vangmai. My company is ambero.space. And if you put in ambero.space into the Google search bar, you'll probably find us.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.